Our first speaker for KetoCon 2018, you know her, you love her. She's my sister from another mister, Miss Carrie Brown.
For 10 months, I have literally been living my dream life. I left corporate America and the bonds of employment when I was deemed surplus to requirements, along with 2,999 colleagues one day last July. Since then, I've been focusing full-time on my passions and doing all the things I love best. Then, late last year, I discovered that I could significantly reduce my outgoings just by moving away from the West Coast. So 4 months ago, given that I had no job and no family to keep me in any particular location, I sold my house in Seattle, paid off my mortgage 24 years early, packed up my home and my kitties, and drove across the top of America in the middle of winter to Connecticut, where I was able to buy my dream house for cash in the middle of a forest, build my dream kitchen and a humongous deck, and embark on a glorious new adventure, creating the life I always wanted, completely debt-free. And no, I didn't win the lottery, although it sure feels like I must have done. Now, if you're sitting here thinking that I'm just one of the lucky ones, or I must magically live a charmed life and can't have faced much in the way of hardship, I should explain that I spent the vast majority of my existence in a massive amount of pain and wishing I were dead. Almost my entire life has been engaged in clawing my way through each day, just trying to survive. And now, every day, I'm pinching myself that the life I currently have is really my life. So how did I go from surviving to thriving? Let's take that journey. I have been depressed my whole life. Apart from the odd little burst of very short-lived joy here and there, there's never been a time when the cloud of depression wasn't hanging over me. Depression wasn't my normal, and since it was all I'd ever known, I didn't recognize it for what it was. It was just how life was, for me anyway. I grew up feeling broken, not good enough, failed, inadequate, and miserable. That's a tough gig for anybody, let alone a 4-year-old. I knew it was all my fault because that's what everyone in my life told me, repeatedly. Apparently, I just needed to sort myself out and start behaving. I tried hard to understand why I felt and behaved the way I did. I never came up with any answers, but it certainly wasn't for lack of trying. Life was up and down, mostly down. Some days were better than others, but there was always an undercurrent of depression that I just could not get past, no matter what I did. I was 19 when I started seeking help from therapists. I spent countless hours, years in fact, with various therapists, counselors, and psychiatrists trying to figure it all out. I constantly tried to snap myself out of it. I desperately tried to stop myself being such a pain in the arse. The way I felt made no sense to me or anyone around me, so I learned to fake my way through life, putting on a game face when I needed and hiding out alone whenever I could, usually with alcohol. Eventually, despite all my best efforts, I gave up and accepted that I was broken and unfixable. I just struggled through life as best I could. I became an expert faker, and no one had any clue about the pain inside. No one even knew I was depressed, although a lot of people had written me off as moody, prickly, and difficult. In reality, I was just very sad and in constant mental anguish. Over the years, I was put on various antidepressants at various times. Some helped a little, most didn't. All had at best annoying and at worst disastrous side effects. It isn't hugely helpful when the meds they put you on to cheer you up cause you to start throwing furniture and smacking people. Luckily, the people who experienced this newly violent Carrie understood it wasn't me, but I could so easily have ended up incarcerated on a felony assault charge that in reality was the work of medications and a wonky brain that I had absolutely no control over. After trying a horde of different meds, I was prescribed one that caused me to have panic attacks 24 hours a day and prevented me from sleeping for 6 weeks straight. I literally thought I had lost my mind. At my wit's end, I gave up on all the meds. I would just have to endure life with this crushing, relentless depression hanging over me. And for years, I did. One evening in March 2013, though, life went seriously sideways. I'd had an especially difficult couple of days and had just hung up on my therapist, telling him I was done with the never-ending struggle and was giving up. And when I said done, I meant completely and totally done with my life. I was driving home from the office later that evening, and as I drove down the hill towards my house, I saw a police SUV coming towards me. As he passed me, I watched in my rearview mirror because I had a suspicion about why he was on my street. I saw him flip a U-turn, and I instantly guessed that my therapist had called 911 on me. I was not wrong. I squealed into my garage and hit the remote control to close the door as fast as I could. I didn't expect the burly cop to leap from his car and throw himself under the door just before it closed. I wasn't in the best frame of mind to have law enforcement show up uninvited and tell me that committing suicide is illegal in Washington state. I hadn't slept or eaten in 2 days. I'd worked 32 hours in the previous 48, and my brain had been trying to kill me for a week. My ability to be reasonable was extremely limited. All I wanted to do was be left alone so I could exit this life in my own way. So when the officer forcibly stopped me from going upstairs to use the bathroom, belligerent Carrie showed up and things went rapidly downhill. Next thing I knew, handcuffs, police backup, and paramedics all appeared. 6 cops and 2 paramedics later, I found myself handcuffed to a gurney in the back of an ambulance racing towards the ER. At the ER, I was handcuffed to the bed and placed under armed guard. For the next 9 hours, I laid alone, sobbing. I was in immense psychological and emotional pain, and as I soon discovered, I was on the very brink of losing my freedom to a law that allows the state to commit anyone they deem dangerous to themselves or others. It was the worst 9 hours of my life. I have never felt more alone, or more hopeless, or more out of control. This episode should have been a huge wake-up call, but it wasn't, because depression isn't something you can think your way out of. You can't think your way out of depression any more than you can think your way out of diabetes or a broken leg. If you could stop being depressed just by thinking differently, I would have stopped when I was 4. Because depression sucks, and you don't have any control over it. You are completely unable to stop the crazy. What the episode did result in was a mandatory visit to a psychiatrist for an evaluation and diagnosis. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder a few weeks later, and there followed a merry-go-round of psychiatrists, doctors, and an assortment of medications while they tried to find something that worked to keep me stable. It was like playing pin the tail on the donkey, only it wasn't fun, and I was the donkey. I was put on medication, the first of which made me almost comatose, so after 2 weeks of that, they tried something else. On the 4th or 5th attempt, they found something that worked just enough to allow me to function, which is pretty important when you're a single girl who has no other means of support. But despite these medications, 9 months after the ER incident, I became suicidal and remained so for 8 months straight. Every waking hour for 8 months, my brain was trying to kill me. Every waking hour. The 24/7 psychological pain during these 8 months was excruciating. But there was no one else to pay the bills or keep a roof over my head, so I somehow managed to drag myself to work. The work helped to drown out the incessant chatter of my brain trying to kill me, and there were people at work who I did not want to subject to seeing me hurt myself. The weekends were spent in a haze on the couch, binge-watching House on Netflix, which kept my brain engaged just enough to stop me from pushing myself over the edge. Imagine spending every waking hour of every day wishing it was time to go to sleep so you'd get a few hours relief from the uncontrollable thoughts in your brain that you should be dead. I literally felt like I had lost my mind. My life was a swirling mass of hopelessness. After 8 months of this living hell, I was put on lamotrigine, and 3 days later, it was as if someone had turned the lights on in my life. Yes, the hell was over! And for 6 months, I experienced joy. But after 6 months, I became suicidal again. They doubled the dose, and the joy returned for 6 months. And then I became suicidal. And they said they had to double the dose again. Because this is what it's like when your brain is trying to kill you. You're in searing emotional and psychological pain, crushing pain that you can make no sense of, pain that has no basis in fact, because there's nothing tangible causing it. It just is. And it's relentless. And you just want the unbearable pain to stop. Every single minute is a mammoth struggle to stay alive. And you have no control over it. And you just want to die. Because it seems like that's the only thing that will make the excruciating pain stop. It's absolutely exhausting. Imagine being in a plane that crashes into the mid-Atlantic Ocean. You're still alive, but alone, bobbing in the water, surrounded by debris and dead bodies, thousands of miles from shore. Parts of you are throbbing with pain, and there's no food or water, but you want to stay alive, so you start treading in the ocean, despite the monumental effort it takes just to keep your head above the water. But eventually, you lose your strength, and you realize it's completely hopeless. You don't want to die, but you just cannot endure the pain and helplessness any longer, and there's nothing you can do about it. Here's what it's like to be suicidal. Imagine yourself standing on top of a long, steep water slide, water gushing from behind you, and you know that at the bottom is a deep pool of water in which you will drown because you can't swim. but the water's coming from behind so fast that you can't step backwards to safety, and suddenly you slip, and you're rushing towards the pool at the bottom, faster and faster, unable to slow down or stop yourself because the water's too strong and the sides are too slippery. And there's nothing you can do. Even though you desperately don't want to go into that pool and drown, you are powerless to stop it. So when they told me they were doubling the dose again, I called BS, and I got really mad. I was not going to sit there like a bump on a log, being fed increasing amounts of drugs to shore me up for the rest of my sometimes almost bearable life. I was no longer prepared to accept the mantra from the medical professions around me. There's no cure for bipolar. You need to be on medication for the rest of your life. Just accept there's things you'll never be able to do. Learn how to make your life bearable around your bipolar. Your bipolar dictates your life now. What jobs you can do and what your relationships look like, even where you can travel. Get used to it. It's really not that bad. And I said no. No to doubling the dose. No to accepting there's no other way. And then I fired everyone. All the doctors and all the psychiatrists, because there was absolutely no critical thinking going on by anyone except me. No one was asking what cured my bipolar except me. Was it genetic, environmental, dietary, or was it psychological? Was it growing up with a manic depressive father, or was it any combination of the above? It made sense to me that if I could figure out what caused it, I might be able to fix it. I know, crazy talk, right? Find the cause and heal myself? What on earth was I thinking? I figured I'd start with genetics, mostly because I did grow up with a manic depressive father, so it made sense to me that there might be a genetic connection. I sent a vial of spit off, and 6 weeks later got a file containing my DNA report. And there it was in black and white. MTHFR. This is a genetic mutation that results in a bunch of not good stuff, one of which is having a reduced ability to methylate. Why does this matter? Because our bodies cannot use B vitamins unless we methylate them first. And what do B vitamins do? One of their biggest tasks is neurotransmitter health. So I had a severe lifelong deficiency of B vitamins, which blood tests corroborated. My neurotransmitters had never been able to function properly. I discovered that I have an intolerance to gluten, although I'm not celiac, and that my serotonin and dopamine pathways were broken in about 40 different places. Serotonin and dopamine are responsible for mood balance. I also do not have the ability to clear toxins effectively, and so if you add all those things up, it was no surprise that depression had plagued me for my entire life. And a mental breakdown of some kind was pretty much bound to happen at some point. Bipolar, come on down. Armed with this info and a slew of food intolerance and blood test results, I engaged the help of a naturopath to help me further interpret my DNA and figure out a plan for healing my many other ailments, which included psoriasis, migraines, constant ear infections, fatigue, IBS, and eczema. Some of the common things that the mainstream medical profession seemed to be unable to fix. Around the same time, I bumped into a doctor on Twitter, and we struck up a conversation. He said that he thought he could help me with my bipolar, so I was all ears. I had already been eating mostly grain and sugar-free, higher protein with masses of non-starchy veggies, along with some healthy whole food fats for about 3.5 years at this point. And although my overall health had improved, eating that way hadn't made a positive impact on my bipolar disorder. My new doctor immediately put me on a ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diets are used very successfully for the treatment of seizures in children. And since the lamotrigine that I was on was an anti-seizure medication, it made sense to me that my bipolar may respond well to a similar diet. So very low carb, moderate protein, high fat it was. I switched to a ketogenic diet in mid-July 2015. I started my naturopath's food elimination protocol and supplementation plan, including methylated B vitamins, 6 weeks later on September 1st. 6 weeks after that, under my doctor's watchful eye, I reduced my lamotrigine to 0 over the course of a week. That was 2.5 years ago, and I have had 0 symptoms of bipolar since I stopped that medication. And believe me, I have tried to make myself depressed because the change was so unbelievable to me. But my brain just doesn't work that way anymore. After a lifetime of being labeled and judged for something I couldn't control, I had finally discovered that I wasn't crazy. It wasn't me. I wasn't to blame. And that changed everything. All it took to save my life, as well as $39,000 a year on medications, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and hospitalizations for migraines, was some supplements, a change in diet, and a case or 2 of Kerrygold butter. Or, as you say in America, butter. So that's how my life went from this to this. From black and white to full-on Technicolor. So until 2.5 years ago, mostly all I wanted to do was die. And yet here I am, literally living my dream. Because it turns out that life doesn't have to suck. Mental health issues don't have to rule your life. There is hope. Depression is not your fault. You are not broken. And you can change your life into whatever you want it to be. Now, I realize that my experience of healing from bipolar disorder is just an N=1, and that it could easily be written off as anecdotal. So I want you to meet an amazing woman, Sarah. Sarah saw my talk here at KetoCon last September. By the time I got off stage, she had already ordered her DNA kit from 23andMe. She was more than ready to figure out her own mental health challenges. Sarah discovered a few weeks later that she also had the MTHFR mutation. So Sarah, on September 22nd last year, how many meds were you on?
Well, I was on about 17 meds, taking about 26 pills a day.
And over the 15 years since your diagnosis, how many other meds have you been on?
Oh gosh, the list is endless. We've tried 30 different meds in combinations, various amounts, various doses.
So shortly after KetoCon, you were actually hospitalized for mental health reasons, right?
Yep.
Okay. So Sarah's husband and I came up with a plan to see if we couldn't get to the bottom of Sarah's struggles. Andrew got Sarah out of the hospital and on a plane to Seattle. Once in Seattle, Sarah moved into my guest room, and I had her meet with my naturopath several times over the course of several weeks. We implemented all sorts of protocols as a result of the 23andMe test results and a bunch of other tests that the naturopath had organized. So Sarah, 9 months later, how many drugs are you on now?
2.
And how do you feel?
It's fantastic to be free of all these different medications, to have my life back, to not have to swallow all these pills every day. I feel great.
And how's your bipolar?
I would say it's as close to remission as it could possibly be.
I'm so proud of you. Thanks, darling. If there's one thing I've learned over the past few years, it's that everybody is different. We are all unique individuals, and not everyone with bipolar and other mental health issues will get the same results by following the exact same protocols as Sarah and I did. Regardless of what the root cause of your health issues are, the important thing for you to know is that there is hope. You are important, important enough to do the work for, important enough to spend the time getting yourself healthy. I genuinely care about every single soul in this room and every single soul watching this. I don't want one more person to suffer like I and so very many others have. 835 people in the US are going to lose their strength to continue fighting the struggle this week while we're in Austin. 835. And 21,000 others are going to be teetering on the brink. And I will do whatever I can to help bring those numbers down. I am no one special. I'm just an ordinary girl who got seriously pissed off with the constant pain and struggle. You can heal too. There is hope. Be ambitious. Imagine a better tomorrow, because you can have a better tomorrow. When life speaks, listen to it. Life is going to speak to you big time over the next 3 days. Write down what resonates. Follow up on it next week. And then keep moving forward one step at a time. Keep it real. Don't listen to the negative self-talk in your head telling you that you're broken and unfixable. Do the work. Fire the people who are not helping you. Hire the people that will. Make the calls and the appointments. Ask questions. Then ask more questions. Keep asking questions. Go through the pain of healing. Get passionate about yourself because you are worth it. Focus that passion on becoming the best you possible. Learn what works for you. You are smarter than anyone else about your own body. The future is the disruption of the present. So seek the tweak until you find what your body needs to thrive. Practice, practice, practice. Build new neural pathways. Banish the negative self-talk. Constantly do the things that help you the most. It's not the big ideas, it's the little tweaks. Refine. Pay attention to what's happening in your body. Tweak as your body changes. What got you to where you are is not what will keep you progressing. Stop doing things that don't matter. Be creative. Reinvent yourself. You can do anything. You can create the life you want. You can create a life you love. Find your inspiration and follow it. My inspiration is you. And my dream is to help as many people as I can. The biggest part of that dream is being able to help as many people as I can escape the demon that is depression in all its various manifestations through a ketogenic diet. Because if I can help even one person escape the living nightmare that is bipolar 2, all my suffering will be worth it. Because you are worth it. You are awesome. And because I obeyed instructions, we have time for Q&A. If anybody has any questions. Do you want to come up to the mic?
Hi.
Hello.
My name's Melissa.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for speaking. It's really touched my heart greatly. When you say a ketogenic diet, are you talking about the classic, 20 grams of carbs a day? Or, have you been able to go ahead and adjust that? Or is it just the strict classic keto?
When I started, for the first 3 months, I was pretty much carnivore. I was, and because we were, for me, keto wasn't weight loss, it was my brain. It was like super high fat, like 0 carb for the first 3 months. So that really helped. But as I've gone on now, two years later, I have discovered that I do better, I feel better if I have some leafy greens.
Okay.
So if I do have carbs now, that's the form it'll come in.
Okay, so absolutely no fruits whatsoever, no berries, no nothing.
I once in a while, not even once a week, maybe a couple of times a month, I'll have some strawberries or raspberries, but I stick to the berries. But that's it. Otherwise, it's, yeah. But I still keep under 20 grams of carbs and, high fat, because that's what I need for my brain. But I must admit, I don't track my macros. I just eat keto foods, and it's working really well for me.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hello.
Hi. So my best friend is, she has bipolar disorder, and for like the past 6 months, I've been sending her research, and she's finally agreed to do it to try and see if it helps. Do you have anywhere where you write more in depth on what has worked for you and some other possibilities for people, just so I can send her there and help her figure it out?
Yeah, so my website is carriebrown.com. And I wrote a series, when I started this whole process, I wrote a series of blogs. They're all tagged with the tag WTF is wrong with me. So if you go to carriebrown.com and in the search type WTF is wrong with me, the whole series of posts I wrote, and if she starts at one end, she can read through the whole thing.
Okay, and then the second question is a little bit more in the weeds. Are you heterozygous or homozygous for the MTHFR?
I'm one, whichever that is.
Okay, me too. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
As somebody that has been on the side of being in deep depression and in that dark hole,
Thank you for still being here.
well, how do you help somebody who is in that hole and in that darkness, and reach out to them and suggest that nutrition and lifestyle change can make that difference? How would you recommend reaching out to somebody who you know is in immense pain?
Love them. Send them, when this gets posted on YouTube, send them my talk. And this isn't about me. It's just, it's very, very difficult. It seems to be very, very difficult to touch the people that you love and that are close to you. And for some bizarre reason, strange humans that we are, we will listen to outsiders can often have more impact than the people close to us. And I don't know why that is. But that may be a good place to start. There are actually, my talk from KetoCon 2017 is up on YouTube now. You could send them that as a way to open the dialogue, and then just love them. And let them know that you understand it's not them.
Thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
Very much.
It's very hard. I think what a lot of people who have not struggled with mental health issues or depression, it's hard for them to understand why we do the things we do when we're depressed. But this is, why doesn't she see it? Well, you have to understand that our brains don't work the same way as other people. So what might seem logical to you, our brains literally don't work that way. So what might seem reasonable to you reaching out to someone with depression, their response might be like, that's crazy. Well, that's because that's the way our brains work. And so it is very, very difficult. And anyone who has someone close to them, I would recommend sending them to, watch a talk like this, sending them somewhere else to get the conversation started. And never, ever, ever say, snap out of it, ever.
Thank you.
First, thank you for your tenacity and sharing your journey. It is absolutely inspiring. When you did your research, did you come across any other mutations that were impacted by a ketogenic diet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But I'm sure there's an endless list. And I'm sure actually some of the doctors and experts that will come up afterwards will probably talk about that. But this was just focused on what I found. I highly recommend. I kind of feel like, I want to start a campaign to get babies, like that you get their DNA, you get your baby and you get your DNA file so that you can figure out right from the get-go. Because if I'd have known, and the MTHFR test, you can do it, it's a simple blood test, it costs $150. I did the full DNA thing, but you can get a blood test. And I'm like, why don't we just take a blood test for every baby? Blood test, MTHFR, it's $150, just do it. They estimate that a third of the population have the MTHFR mutation. So there's a third of us that are like ticking time bombs. And it may not always express itself, and it may express itself in a different way to how it did with me. But there's a lot of people who are at risk, and it's a really simple test. It's just a blood test. Why don't we just test everybody when they're born, and then if you have it, then we give you methylated B vitamins, and none of this ever happens. My life would have been completely different had I known that gene was an issue with me right from the get-go. Completely different.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. Have a great 3 days.